Thank you so much. Welcome. Before we start, I want to make sure that anybody that needs translation services, please raise your hand. The staff will be able to help you with translation headsets to facilitate the conversation today, either in English or Spanish. My name is Frankie Miranda, and I am the president of the Hispanic Federation. And welcome to the launch of a new program, Advance, Change Together, or ACT, a Latinx LGBTQ+ advocacy and capacity building initiative that will empower and support organizations working on the front line to protect and serve Latinx LGBTQ+ communities around the country. But before we go into the details about this new effort, I want to pause and remember the 49 innocent people taken from us and the hundreds of lives shattered 6 years ago at the Pulse nightclub. Most of them from our Latinx community. And while we will never forget them, there is still a deliberate movement in this country to try to erase them from our memory. And by that, they also want to silence who we are and our fight to be seen and treated with fairness and dignity. Yes, there are forces right now that wish to erase our demand for change, that wish to silence our Latinx voices, our unique Latinx LGBTQ+ voices. They wish to silence us even though that it is our Latinx, LGBTQ+, and our communities of colors, the ones that are disproportionately impacted by gun violence and hate crimes. And their attempt to silence us, to not have us be seen, heard, and valued, comes in the form of a wave of anti-LGBTQ+ legislation sweeping across the country, including the discriminatory Don't Say Gay bill signed into law by Florida Governor DeSantis in late March. But Florida is not alone. In fact, more than 300 anti-LGBTQ+ bills were introduced this year across the country, targeting the most vulnerable in our community. For me, this is personal. Not only because I am the first gay president of the Hispanic Federation, but because I understand in carne propia how the work of our organization, the advocacy, the culturally and linguistically competent community engagement that we can do as leaders, can guarantee the basic rights of the most vulnerable members of the Latinx LGBTQ community. How, with the right kind of investments, organizations can foster diverse leadership that can shape an agenda that could truly reflect our unique challenges and intersectionality. An agenda that will tackle issues unique to our LGBTQ+ communities, such as race, language, religion, immigration, our own experience. See, as a queer boy growing up in Puerto Rico, I grew up in the kind of environment that Don't Say Gay wants to institute, where queer children can be bullied and abused and have no one to turn to. An environment where, as an adolescent, the only people that get close to you are those that want to exploit you. These laws don't protect children. These laws make them more vulnerable. And that's the kind of environment that many politicians want to create, regardless of what science says, or educators, or even the majority of public opinion. For me, this is personal. As an adult, I fell in love with my life partner, Ricardo, only to then be separated by immigration laws that didn't recognize our love. And in the same way we fought back until we got marriage equality, A fight that the Hispanic Federation not only allowed me to be part of, but encouraged me to be part of. As more and more Latinx people understood that the fight for marriage equality was the fight about keeping families together, protecting the sanctity of love and family unity. And after 10 years living as a binational couple, and thanks to the hard-fought passage of marriage equality, I was able to reunite with Ricardo and formalize our union as life partners that we are. It is amazing that it's already been 8 years since Ricardo and I have been married. So, yes, policy matters. And it's about the lives of human beings across the country. It is about all of us. This is personal because it was at the Federation, an organization created by Latinx people and for Latinx people, that I was able to be protected, accepted, respected, and developed as a leader. That I learned to be proud of being queer. This initiative today that we're announcing is a continuation of the work that started by our founding president, Luis Miranda, 32 years ago. A mission to provide capacity building to our Latinx organizations that continue to be so underfunded even still today. And today, I take this legacy from Luis and others after him, Jose Calderon, also previous president of the Hispanic Federation, and wanted to make sure that we invest in our LGBTQ Latinx organizations to protect our community. This is the way that I can continue their legacy, Luis's legacy, the Hispanic Federation legacy. But to understand, and before we explain a little bit more about this initiative, we need to understand the real challenges we're facing today, in this day and age. And for that, I want to invite an incredible group of leaders from across the country that say presented today here. And to lead that conversation, I would like to bring to the stage Vice President for Federal Policy and Advocacy for the Hispanic Federation, Laura Esquivel.
So I think it's really important, and I think many of you would agree, that to understand where we are, we have to know where we've come from. So there's a misconception that Latino, Latinx, LGBTQ people have not been here in the fight for civil rights, that somehow we were just passive bystanders. Nothing could be further from the truth. For over 40 years, Latinx, LGBTQ plus activists and organizations have worked tirelessly to give voice to our communities, to overcome homophobia in Latino communities, and to overcome racism in LGBTQ communities. I should know, because I've been one of them. Fortunately, there are now books and even documentaries that are starting to tell our stories so that we can take our rightful place in the history of the fight for equality. A fight for civil rights that has seen unprecedented successes and change in a relatively short period of time. We have fought for our human rights to be recognized and to be respected, not just tolerated, as whole people, both Latino and queer. We have faced daunting odds and received little support relative to other communities, yet we have persevered and we have seen success. And we are here today to continue to tell our stories. For example, did you know that the first major civil rights leader to speak out publicly in support of gay rights was Cesar Chavez? 35 years ago, way before it was cool, Cesar was a speaker at the 1987 March on Washington for gay and lesbian rights. I should know, because I was there. 1987 was the same year the first and only national LGBT Latinx organization called YEGO was founded. At its height, YEGO had an annual budget of nearly $3 million and 30 staff, giving it the opportunity to develop innovative solutions to social, health, and political disparities that affected the lives and well-being of Latino LGBT people and their families due to discrimination. I should know, because I was there as a co-founder of AGO. AGO faced many struggles, and after 17 years in existence, closed its doors in 2004. For the past 18 years, there has been no national voice for Latinx LGBTQ communities. In spite of the fact that the discrimination, the compounded effects of discrimination, racism, anti-immigrant hate, homophobia, and transphobia hits our communities particularly hard. For example, Latinx transgender people often live in extreme poverty, with 28% reporting an annual household income of less than $10,000 a year. Nearly double the rate for transgender people of all races, over 5 times the general Latinx population rate. And the rate for Latino and Latina trans immigrants living in extreme poverty is 43%. 47% of trans Latinx people report having attempted suicide. Of those who attend school in grades K through 12, 77% reported harassment, 36% physical assault, and 13% sexual assault. The harassment is so severe it led to 21% to just leave school, and this is in grades K through 12. And in spite of all of this, I want to make an important point about how our communities are perceived and stereotyped when it comes to homophobia. I'm going to say this, and I want you to hear it. Latino communities are no more homophobic than the general population. I say this not only as someone who has the lived experience of being a completely out and very public Latina lesbian for the past 50 years. But also because the research supports this. Yet Latino and other people of color are often scapegoated when pro-LGBT ballot measures fail and are accused of being more homophobic and transphobic than their white peers. There is ample research, use the Google, that shows that Latinos and Hispanics are solid supporters of fair and equal treatment for LGBT people. This supports what many of us as queer Latinos and Latinas have experienced in our familias and in our communities. And even when it doesn't line up with their religious beliefs, Latinos believe we should be protected from discrimination and that our families should be allowed to thrive. Yet in spite of all this progress, not just in public opinion, but also in law and politics, our communities are under attack, as Frankie said. Anti-gay legislation and rhetoric is spreading like wildfire across the country. The thinking is that it is no longer socially acceptable to attack us outright, so they're going after the most vulnerable members of our communities, our trans brothers and sisters and our youth. But these attacks are attacks on all of us because they reflect the desire to turn back the clock on our hard-won rights, and they are reaching a fever pitch. In 2022, 14 anti-LGBTQ bills, all targeted at trans people, have already been signed into law. This doesn't include executive actions like in Texas that criminalize parents and health professionals as child abusers for providing gender-affirming care for their children. These new laws restrict access to health care, bar trans people from restrooms and sports, or prevent updating government-issued IDs to reflect our actual identity. We're going backwards in LGBTQ acceptance and understanding, not forwards. The attack on Roe isn't only about the denial of abortion rights. It's about denying bodily autonomy and denying possibilities in life. This isn't that they're coming for us next moment. They've already come for us, and the fight of our lives is here. According to a recent census analysis, about 2.3 million LGBT Latinx adults live in the US. And a Gallup poll last week just found that 11% of US Latino adults, nearly twice the rate of both non-Hispanic whites and Black Americans, say they identify as LGBTQ. That number was even higher among Gen Zers, people under 25, where more than 1 in 5 said they were LGBTQ. I mean, I'm very happy about these numbers. Partly because I think it reflects that more of us are willing to be honest about who we are. You cannot legislate us away. And it's not just our voices that are important, our lives are important. For that reason, the work of LGBTQ Latinx organizations and advocates, while never broadly supported and chronically underfunded, continues. We hope that with the help of Hispanic Federation and others, that work will be strengthened. We have brought to you today a panel of advocates who represent a wide swath of organizations from all across the country to speak for themselves and for their communities, for our communities, to tell you what the reality is for so many of us, and to remind you in no uncertain terms that we will not stop fighting for our rights and to protect those that we, and I dare say some of you, love. So if our panelists would start to join me on the stage. Our first panelist is Representative Carlos Guillermo-Smith. Carlos Guillermo-Smith. This is his hometown. Carlos Guillermo-Smith was elected in 2016 to serve District 49 in the Florida House of Representatives. Carlos made history with his election by becoming Florida's first openly LGBTQ Latino state lawmaker. He's a respected civil rights leader who's brought millions of dollars in state funding for wounded combat veterans, first responders, the developmentally disabled, and those affected by the Pulse nightclub tragedy. Our second panelist is Gabriella Rodriguez, Executive Director of Q Latinx. Also here in Orlando, Gabriella is an advocate for social justice and wellness in Central Florida. She fights HIV stigma and increases access to care as a member of the Ryan White Central Florida HIV Planning Council. She worked as a case manager following the 2016 Pulse massacre of largely Latinx LGBTQ people to provide support and services for those impacted. In 2020, Gabriella became Executive Director of Q Latinx, a grassroots racial, social, and gender justice organization dedicated to the advancement and empowerment of Central Florida's LGBTQ+ Latinx community. Our third panelist is Julio Rodriguez, Board President of ALMA. Julio comes to us from the great city of Chicago. Julio has more than 30 years of community organizing experience, which includes serving on multiple nonprofit and community boards, such as the AIDS Foundation of Chicago, the Mayor's Advisory Council on LGBTQ issues, and the National Latino, Lesbian, and Gay Organization, NAGO. He is a co-founder and current executive producer. Sorry, I just lost my notes. He's not an executive producer unless you're like all the other days. He's a co-founder and current board member of ALMA, one of the oldest Latinx LGBTQ nonprofits in Chicago and the Midwest, founded 30 years ago. Julio currently works for the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity as a deputy director of the Office of Employment and Training. Our next panelist is Ana Andrea Molina. Who comes to us from Houston, Texas. After a group of transgender Latino women in Texas faced discrimination when using a restroom, Ana Andrea created Organización Latina de Trans in Texas in 2015. The organization works to defend, support, and provide resources for transgender Latinas across Texas. Ana Andrea joined us from Houston, where she works tirelessly to advance the human rights and equity for transgender women, migrants, and survivors of sexual assault at the U.S.-Mexico border. Ana Andrea is a native of Matamoros, Mexico. And as Frankie mentioned, we want everybody to feel free to speak in the language they're most comfortable in, so Ana Andrea will be speaking in Spanish. Our next, and some of our other panelists maybe as well. Our next panelist is Ari Gutierrez Arambula, who is from my hometown of Los Angeles on the West Coast. For over 30 years, Ari is the co-founder and advisory board president emerita of Latino Equality Alliance, or LEA. For over 30 years, Ari has been an advocate for the social development and empowerment of LGBTQ Latinas and Latinos. Ari is a co-founder of the only Latino LGBTQ PAC in the country, called Honor PAC, and on the founding advisory board president of the Latino Equality Alliance, a nonprofit organization providing advocacy, leadership development, and public education that honors our cultural traditions and is accessible to youth and their parents. Ari also serves as programming chair for Stonewall Democratic Club and treasurer of the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare Foundation. And last but definitely not least is my friend Wilfredo Labiosa. Wilfred has been a community leader and advocate for the last 30 years, working in the public health field with marginalized communities such as the Latino and LGBTQ communities in Cuba, the U.S., and Puerto Rico. Wilfred is currently the CEO of Waves Ahead Corporation, a nonprofit organization in Puerto Rico, whose main objective is to support the development and transformation of LGBTQ communities, specifically our seniors and homeless. He manages 3 community centers across Puerto Rico, and I understand is getting ready to open the 4th. So that's what so we're gonna start with Carlos.
Thank you. Well, good morning. Buenos días a todos. I'm Carlos Guillermo Smith, representante Carlos Guillermo Smith, Distrito 49, and District 49 in the Florida House of Representatives. I want to say thank you to the Hispanic Federation for this very, very important investment in the LGBTQ Latino community and for hosting this event here in Orlando, in Florida. Because right now, Florida really is the center and a bellwether state of where so much homophobia and transphobia and bigotry is being used to divide our communities and score political points. It's not lost on me that we are just 2 days out from the 6-year remembrance of the tragedy at Pulse nightclub that impacted so many survivors and family members who are here joining us in this space today. You know, as someone myself personally who has survived anti-gay hate violence while I was a student at UCF, and after seeing the way that our community was deeply impacted by Pulse, I've really understood and seen the consequences of hatred and bigotry and how it can tear our communities apart. And I suppose that's why I've always been unapologetic in defense of this community and in defense of my values and my family and my husband, Jared. We just came from the 2022 legislative session where the Don't Say Gay bill was passed into law, which is a very thinly veiled attempt to push our community back into the closet, to censor us in our public schools, and we're already seeing the consequences of Don't Say Gay happening now, whether it be through school districts wanting to cover up protests against the Don't Say Gay bill in the school yearbooks, or valedictorians in Florida being told that they cannot talk about gay and trans issues during their graduation speeches. We are seeing the impact of this bill already, especially as it's being replicated in other states across the country who are engaged in this race to the bottom. We've seen book banning happening in the state of Florida that is centered around censoring books that have LGBTQ content. Books that are really, really important for LGBT and queer youth who need to see themselves in art, in literature, and in our schools as healthy and normal residents who participate and exist in all of our schools and in all of our communities. And I can tell you right now, one of the things that we really need to assess how we're doing as a community in advocating for our most vulnerable is we always have to ask this question: how are the kids doing? Well, we already know that LGBTQ youth are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than their peers. We know that in the last 2 years, according to the CDC Youth Behavior Risk Survey conducted here in the state of Florida, we, for the first time in nearly a decade, actually saw an increase in suicidal ideation amongst Florida's LGBTQ youth. The first time we've seen an increase in the last decade. And it was immediately announced afterwards by the Florida Department of Education that they would stop participating in that survey after being involved in it for 31 years. So we know that they're coming for us and that the impact is very deep and very real. And we also have to understand that they are, as well, using the transgender community to try to divide us. They are going after trans people. They are using terms like gender ideology to try to turn the rights of trans people to exist into some sort of debate or a discussion. And here in the state of Florida, we already have Republican lawmakers promising to bring hateful legislation next year that would criminalize doctors and parents that provide life-saving health care to trans youth. So we already know that the platitudes that we hear from the other side about parental rights are total bullcrap. So I think what I leave you with as we're having this really important conversation about the consequences of hatred and bigotry on our youth in particular is a bit of hope, which is that for every single affirming, supporting, and accepting adult in an LGBTQ young person's life, just having one accepting, affirming adult decreases the suicidal ideation by 40%. So my charge and my call to action to folks who are here in this room, who are doing this work every day is, well, first, thank you, but also be that role model and be that supportive adult in a queer young person's life, because it really can save their life. So thank you for being here, and thank you to the Hispanic Federation for hosting this conversation today.
Gabriella Rodriguez, as mentioned, and I stand here as a proud, queer, Chicago-born, Florida-raised Latinx advocate. And as mentioned, I sit as the executive director of Latinx, a grassroots organization that was started shortly after the Pulse tragedy. We work to aim towards the advancement and empowerment of our Latinx LGBTQ folks here in the Central Florida area. We were birthed as a response to the need for nuestro gente, as we noticed that much of the conversation wasn't necessarily for us or by us. Because after all the lights and the cameras left, we were behind to pick up the pieces, to heal, to hold each other, and to challenge these systems. Because there was really no rule book in what this looked like. So we had a long road ahead. Many of us were into immediate action, holding several hats as case managers, counselors, familia, friends, meeting people where they were, whether that's by the bedside, at a hospital, in the corner cafecito shop, or meeting people to address and support them day to day on those late night calls, de-escalating thoughts of suicide. But we showed up, and it was through this work many of us began creating and changing these narratives, occupying these spaces, asking these questions, and demanding action. From the countless conversations had with officials and media and others, we quickly understood the gaps that existed and the lack of representation in these spaces, in these decision-making spaces that we needed to be in. And I say this because we did a lot of this work on a grassroots level with little to no funding. Our level of resistance and resourcefulness, in my eyes, was truly inspiring over these past 6 years. Now that I look back, we figured out how to make it work amongst each other. And although many of those that were affected needed those immediate wounds addressed, they continue 6 years later with individuals needing surgery, individuals needing someone to stand by them, like Carlos mentioned. It's those long-term conversations and the need for mental health and wellness that are dire within our communities. And many don't understand why talk therapy doesn't work, right? Because many of us have been taught que eso se queda en casa, right? And that outside of those trusted spaces, those conversations don't happen. So we have to unravel years and years of what that looks like to move from surviving to be able to thrive. But I think it goes further than that. I think that our queer community, our Latinx queer community, is still a very stigmatized and complicated concept, right? To consider oneself anything but heterosexual is a revolutionary act, and where do we stand in these spaces, especially within our communities of color. And the violence that comes to our communities of color includes discriminatory legislation, like Carlos mentioned, the societal ignorance, and various forms of violence. With the recent bills like the Don't Say Gay or the Stop Woke bill that was passed recently, it further silences our voices and places us in higher levels and rates of violence with this rhetoric. But the thing is that the lack of trust has been broken within these systems, so it's important for us to move and create awareness and visibility in spaces like these. Places of power is vital, and I believe that if we as a society can be more responsive to the presence of these violent histories and acknowledge them and be in these spaces, we can shift our vocabulary and hold powers to a higher level of accountability. We must all be accountable and craft our vocabulary of violence from the experiences and the perspectives of those that were most vulnerable and those that were impacted. So it's vital for us to continue to be proactive, to be intentional about our language, the literature we consume, and the communities we really support. For it to be more than just something that happens during Pride, right? Don't reach out in the middle of May and ask for an interview. No, be there present all the time. And it's through these spaces and these actions that we can ensure that our victims, survivors, and those impacted within our communities by these hateful acts are never forgotten and reaffirmed and supported.
So I don't know that I'll be as eloquent as the two speakers you just heard from, but I guess one of the things I want to start out with is that our organization, the Association of Latinos and Latinos Motivating Action, was started in 1989 by 5 guys who really knew nothing about starting an organization, and I was one of them. So 33 years later, and I'm 63, I'm still with all. We are a volunteer-run, volunteer-led organization. We came to be as a result of men dying in a pandemic. And here we are 33 years later, and there are still people dying, and there's still a pandemic. The fact that I am 63 and sitting here is a miracle in and of itself, because of all the Latino friends that I lost during the AIDS crisis. So I walk in their spirit and in their histories. But I tell you that because 33 years later, we are still a volunteer-led organization, and that is a trust. That there is no excuse for the 6th largest state in the nation, with the 6th largest Latino population, that one organization is the 3rd largest state for LGBTQ queer Latinx people exists. That is shame on philanthropy, it's shame on the taxpayers, and it's shame on our government. Because the reality is, we deserve The other thing that's important about the work that we do is intersectionality. So when people say, well, Julio, we want you to talk about gay today. Tomorrow, can you talk about immigration? Or tomorrow, can you talk about something that's going on? It's like, well, you know what? I think I can talk about all those things. I can even talk about parenting. I can talk about schools. I can talk about things like sports. oh yeah, I'm gay, but I actually do sports. But I think this sense that we are a disease-oriented community, because gay men in this country, the way that they get funding is by disease, right? Still the single biggest source of funding, and Diego was a good example of not making a mistake again. We cannot build organizations based on disease. Our people have thrived in this country with limited resources. Why? Because the fact is that our greatest resources are our people. I recently received an award in my city for the work that I do in my community. My proudest moment was that my 85-year-old father was in that audience. And the most important thing is that in 1989, when I marched in that first parade as a Latino, as a queer, there he was on the corner. Julio, estoy aquí! The other thing that we have to fight is our invisibility in this nation. And what I'm about to say is not going to be popular. I'm looking at my friends from Chicago. But we can't be hidden by black and brown labels. When we use terms like that, then the Puerto Rican, the Mexican, the Venezuelan, the Colombian, all of this gets lost. And the reality is terms like that whitewash us. They make us, who is this brown? I don't know because my father doesn't know what brown is. I look at this room and there are all kinds of shades of brown. We have to fight that invisibility. One of the things I learned through the AIDS epidemic was that our stories were lost. When you look at that particular pandemic, and now even in COVID, our stories are lost. So one of our goals and our mission is to make sure that the fabric, the mosaic that is the Latino community is clearly, fully present. We are not a color. We are of origins of national identity that is very complex. You cannot put us in a box and check. So let's not do that to ourselves. So I challenge all of you, and I challenge funders. The Hispanic Federation, thank you so much for starting this. But let's call on all these foundations whose funding has gone down and say to them, we are not someplace to be checked. We are not one color, and we are fully diverse in all the needs that we have. And intersectionality of issues is what's critical. And so, thank you.
Buenas tardes, buenos días, me siento privilegiada por estar en el espacio, pero antes de continuar me gustaría contar la vida de las mujeres trans que asisten a esta reunión. Pero hay mucho que hacer. En el público hay tres, una enfrente. Eso es una llamada de atención. Creo que tenemos que incluir a más mujeres trans a las conversaciones, mujeres trans migrantes, mujeres trans negras, garífonas, indocumentadas. Las mujeres trans, hoy por hoy, hemos sido un tema político. Vengo de Texas, donde la ignorancia de los gobernadores, igual que en la Florida, se dejan guiar y manipular, ¿verdad? Y nos utiliza como un tema político hoy por hoy. Las mujeres trans no somos un tema político, somos existencia, somos resistencia, somos Cuando inicié Organización Latina de Trans en Texas, era una mujer trans, inmigrante, indocumentada, y todo el mundo me decía que no podía hacer una organización porque era indocumentada, porque ni siquiera hablaba inglés. sigo sin hablar inglés. Afortunadamente ya no estoy documentada, tengo el privilegio de tener asilo hace un par de años, pero todo lo que yo comunico es documentada. Y eso quiere decir que sí se puede. Por más que nos digan que no podemos, sí se puede. Lo podemos lograr porque las mujeres somos resilientes, somos chingonas en una palabra. Y de verdad que necesitamos incluir a las mujeres trans en muchas conversaciones. Las leyendas dicen que las mujeres trans éramos chamanes, llevábamos pueblos, éramos guerreras. Y eso es lo que les da miedo. Cuando crié la Organización Latina Trans en Texas, la crié basada en la misma transfobia que vivimos en nuestra comunidad. La sociedad, las organizaciones, nuestra propia comunidad tiene una deuda histórica con las mujeres trans. Y tenemos que detenernos. Y no podemos avanzar solo por avanzar. Necesitamos avanzar todos juntos. Y las mujeres trans están rezagadas. Estoy aquí, me siento contenta por ocupar el espacio y por ver esas nuevas iniciativas. Esperemos que los recursos lleguen a los grupos liderados por mujeres trans. Esperemos que el heteronormatismo y el cisgénero de nuestras comunidades LGBT no sigan rezagando el liderazgo de las mujeres trans. Hoy por hoy las mujeres trans continuamos sobreviviendo, aún en Texas, cuando todo está en nuestra contra, aún en la Florida, cuando la ignorancia de los gobernadores, porque no hay otra palabra más que ignorancia, está atacándonos, ¿verdad? Está atacándonos del lado más débil, con nuestros niños. En Texas nos están diciendo que lo que está pasando con los niños es ilegal, porque esa es su palabra, ¿verdad? Pero estamos luchando, ¿verdad? Y de verdad necesitamos ser incluidas, necesitamos ocupar esos espacios de liderazgo y de poder. Hemos estado aquí por mucho tiempo y aquí vamos a estar. Nos han golpeado, nos han humillado, nos han asaltado, nos han enterrado, pero se les olvidó que somos lesbianas. Enviemos todos esos recursos a nuestras líderes trans en todo el país que están haciendo trabajo de base comunitaria, que están liderando personas de los sistemas de prisiones, que están dándole de comer a las mujeres trans y a la comunidad que están pobres. Tenemos un gran compromiso y las mujeres trans estamos haciendo un trabajo. No ocupemos el liderazgo de ellas, aumentemos el liderazgo. También las trabajadoras sexuales en este momento no necesitan ser rescatadas. Las trabajadoras sexuales necesitan ser protegidas. Gracias.
Thank you, Laura, and the Hispanic Federation for including my organization, Latino Equality Alliance, and also the Honor Political Action Committee. You know, at a time when that came together, many of us were working in a community laissez-faire, you know, we were just volunteering, let's go do this, let's do that. I was in the communication business, so I was doing some of the PR stuff. And, but when we wanted to get our folks elected, even the LGBT organizations, they wouldn't even interview our candidates because they don't fund, they don't support that side of the river. We created our own space, we created our own organization with our own money, and lifted up our candidates. We now have a statewide elected LGBT candidate in Gabriella in California as insurance commissioner. So that's a good example of working the politics front of it. On the other side, where we encountered Prop 8, you know, in 2008, you know, here everybody was celebrating the Summer of Love with marriage equality having come about, and then it was taken away. So they literally took away rights that we had earned. And the way they did it was through very harsh, negative media campaigns that made everyone a a suspect that made everyone, so we opened a campaign office to campaign against property in East LA on Cesar Chavez Street, and it was the first political office that was openly gay. And we actually were welcomed by the community more than people told us that we would be. And we had so many volunteers and all that, but we were still sort of this outpost that the LGBT orgs who were working the campaign officially, they just kind of put up with us. And they said, okay, go do whatever. And, but we actually did the work, and we were actually doing community electoral work in East LA and talking to voters and all that. And although we didn't win that night in November 2008, we moved the outcome from like a 20% that it had been a few years prior in a similar initiative to about 40%. So we didn't make it to the 50% plus that we needed, but it moved. And so that's one of the points that Laura made earlier, is that there is not more homophobia in our community than in any other. And the fact is that our community does welcome us and accept us, and we are part of the community. But nobody, really worked that angle before. So that's what we decided that we needed to do, and that's where Latino Equality Alliance was established by grassroots organizers. There was no funding though, and so we had to create a nonprofit space, organization. The funders, embarrassed by the fact that they had never funded an LGBT political effort in the communities of color, came up with some money. So we applied, got some money, and we're able to do the work. But our key, one of the things that keeps coming up with the Don't Say Gay and other initiatives is about what happens in school and with young people. In our community, it's about, we want our kids to be, our families to be welcomed at school, but also at home. And also within our whole community. We want to be able to live in our community and not have to hide, and not be, cornered into not being who we are. So it's really kind of a whole approach in terms of community health and of the work that we're doing in the community. And one of the things that we found when we're doing work at school is that, sure, there's GSA, Gay Straight Alliance type clubs, but usually there's no funding from the school districts for those. Usually it's some gay teacher that gets picked to be the leader for the group. No materials, no funding, no guidance, and just by virtue of maybe being gay, that they are now qualified to do that work. So our approach is to be able to help fund that, to operationalize that in terms of making sure that it's part of the school funding criteria, and also that those advisors are given support in terms of materials and guidance into what is age appropriate and where folks need it. On a personal level, I'm also a mom, happily married, and have a 10-year-old. And even at her age, she'll remind me she's actually 11. She has friends who are coming out as gay and trying to find themselves. And I was talking to a parent the other day who says, I said, oh, my daughter was in the gay pride parade with the mayor from West Hollywood. Oh, great. But I said, well, is she going to the programs that we have? No, she's a little too young for that. So, that's kind of interesting that these kids need that support And we need to be able to develop programs that are age appropriate and are helpful to them and to their families when they need them and when they're ready for them. So I think overall, my message is that our community is loving, welcoming, and wants to be healthy and successful. Just like when their kid was born, they want them to do anything and everything in life, and they're gonna love them. That should not change when they come out as gay. So thank you so much for your support.
Saludos, soy Gabriella de Puerto Rico y como hay tanta necesidad en Puerto Rico decidí hacer unas anotaciones porque si no de aquí me botan. Así que voy a enfocarme en las anotaciones porque hay tanta necesidad que decidí enfocarme en unas particulares. Represento a Ways Ahead, was founded in early 2017 to address public health inequities impacting the LGBT and older adult senior in Puerto Rico. Our programs and community centers have been established against a political, conservative, homophobic, transphobic, machista atmosphere in Puerto Rico, against many odds, plus environmental factors that have impacted us. Ways Ahead addresses the mental health issues impacting our LGBT seniors, among the many issues. Among them, food insecurities, high suicide rates, as over 68% of all deaths by suicide in Puerto Rico are older adults 55 years and older, are not the youth, are the older adults. Lack of sustainable housing. Because of this, we are initiating, and I can announce it here, 65 units focused on the LGBT older adult in the town of All of these struggles are and should be our struggles. Citizens of Puerto Rico are aging at a rapid pace. Hence, the politics of today impact the senior of tomorrow. Puerto Ricans in the motherland, when they move to the U.S. mainland, bring these issues with them. We have been talking about it earlier today here in Orlando. If LGBT Puerto Ricans are impacted in Puerto Rico, then it will impact the LGBT elders and community in the mainland. We must work together to change the atmosphere being lived today that is bringing anxiety, sadness, trauma, and depression to our LGBT community. We must stand together, support initiatives like this of the Hispanic Federation, that I have to admit, without them, we cannot do the work in Puerto Rico. Without the foundation of Ricky Martin that support Ways Ahead, we cannot do our work because they don't understand us. They don't want to put us in their agenda. And we must stand together so that they put us in their agenda. So I'm just not going to take more of your time. Thank you very much.
To the next section of the program, but we will bring you back for the Q&A. And this is the moment in which I am ready to just announce that why we're here today, and is to announce that the Hispanic Federation has made a commitment of $1 million to create a fund and fund the Advanced Change Together initiative with the goal to support at least 20 LGBTQ Latinx organizations throughout the country that they can apply for grants to up to $50,000, have a commitment of engagement for 2 years, receive capacity building, and have one convening later this year in Washington, D.C., when we are going to be talking about the new realities, the new challenges, and what is going to be the Latinx LGBTQ agenda in the country. So we are very, very pleased also to announce, in addition to this $1 million, already the Miranda Family Fund has committed to support this initiative. Thank you. And Broadway Cares, Equity Heights AIDS also have committed, but we want this to be many, many more. But aside from that, I think that it's important that we send this message all across to our communities, and for that, we cannot do this alone. And for that, we have incredible ambassadors. So I'm going to invite immediately to the stage two people that are here, very special people. One is international renowned performer, singer, artist, and television star Valentina. Who's on the stage. Also want to bring in somebody that you may know from many of his roles: producer, actor, songwriter, direct producer, and he's a little bit of everything, and is very dear to our heart. Lin-Manuel. But before we go to Lin-Manuel and Valentina, we have a very special guest that is coming in via Zoom. Stephanie Beatriz, that is an actress, director, best known for her roles in Encanto, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and In the Heights. Stephanie Beatriz, thank you so much for joining us. We can see you. Stephanie, why was it important for you to join us today?
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here for this announcement and to see all of you and to listen to that incredible panel. Hi, it's me, Valentina.
So Stephanie, tell us a little bit more about your experience as a person in the arts, and how do you feel that visibility helps so much the cause of LGBTQ Latinx people in this country?
Visibility is everything, especially for groups like ours, which is really an intersectional group. LGBTQIA people that are also Latino are faced with so many things sort of getting in the way of them possibly being their fullest, most magical, amazing selves, and also being seen and also having access. And so by myself being out and very proud as a bisexual Latina, I'm able to bring visibility to not only other artists, but also like people just in general that might feel like they don't have a place in the world, that they're not seen, that they're not important. One of the speakers on the panel said that one of the most important things that an LGBTQ kid can see is someone else being successful, someone living a happy, full, fulfilling life. And that's what I am trying to do. I'm trying to sort of say openly that, look, here I am as an artist, I'm hopefully in some of your favorite things, and I am bisexual, and I'm out and proud about it, and I'm trying to bring that visibility to everything that I do. It's a part of the conversations that I have all of the time, and by me being out and living openly as a bisexual Latina, I'm hopeful that people that see me can sort of say to themselves, happiness, success, a future is possible for me. And that's also why I'm just so excited about the ACT initiative, because it brings together all of these incredible organizations and allows them to partner in this like broader sense, because that partnering and that joint agenda and those additional resources are just going to sort of move and advance this cause forward for every single LGBTQIA person in the Latino community to feel seen, heard, and supported.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I know you are in the middle of a project, and you have paused the project to be here with us. So thank you for everything that you do. You make us proud.
I'm truly very quickly before I leave, that organizing is everything.
Yes.
As you've heard this morning already, all of these groups are organized. And yet, there's organization happening right now and bills being pushed through that are hateful, fearful, scared. And what we are planning to do here is organize to confront that, to battle that with love and hope and resources, which is really, really lovely, and I'm just so excited.
Thank you so much. Let's talk now with Valentina, the lovely Valentina. Valentina, you are Your work is recognized internationally. You are one of very hardworking artists. My husband loves you. I have to say, he asked me to say this in public. Talk to us about your journey and the challenges of your career, the acceptance, whether or not you are being welcome, and what are the other doors that you probably need to just use your fabulous skills and keep them open.
Well, thank you so much. It's a really big honor. I have to admit, I'm very nervous being among all of you, so eloquent and so brave. And there's a lot that I would like to speak on and why I'm here. And it really matters to me because I'm here for the LGBTQ plus children, the children that are going to lead us to our future, to be a beacon of light for them. Growing up in a world that wasn't really open for somebody like me, it was really challenging being from a Latino household, and for factors like machismo, religion. It was very challenging for me to navigate my identity in my own house. And then when I started school, I as well felt lots of challenges in school. It was second grade, and my parents had to go to a meeting with my teacher saying that I was not learning how to read because I myself was so afraid at school. I was so mistreated by other boys at school. I didn't have friends. I didn't have a fixed personality. I kind of just was not paying attention, was not there. That meeting, it changed my life, and then my mom enrolled me to be in a free program called Magnet in Los Angeles. And I started to study the performing arts in 5th grade, and it changed my life. I got bussed out to a performing arts school, and I had to wake up at 4:30 in the morning every single day. But it was worth it for me because I was now paying attention because I was learning about things that I loved, like dance, and I would get to learn makeup, and I would have rehearsals. And in those times, I was going far away from my home, a place where I couldn't be myself, and I was going to school to be myself. And it really saved me. It really gave me an opportunity. The way that I was navigating so much confusion in myself was really challenging. When I reached singing, I was in 6th grade, I was a soprano, and I could hit the highest notes. I hadn't reached puberty yet. When that changed, it scared me, and it was really difficult to navigate my new voice. These are things that I don't think a lot of people would acknowledge or understand, but here I am speaking about it, and I wish somebody was there for me to hold my hand or to help me navigate. And now that I'm put in roles that are a lot more feminine, I'm to seek higher and higher every time. And when I'm told to seek higher, there's the voices of my father telling me I'm not allowed to sing that song, or don't walk that way. And I have to fight through it every time. And when I name myself Valentina, I named myself Valentina for the bravery, the valentía dentro de mí. And thank you for all that you're doing. I really, really, truly appreciate it. And it's very important for me to be that beacon of light for people, for those young kids, because they're not alone. I'm here. I'm here standing up against those bullies. And even if they're in their homes and they can't speak about what they think because they know something is up, or they can't even speak about it with anybody, with their own people that are their mother or their father that might judge them. They go to their school and they get bullied. They feel in fear to go to school. I myself, I've been assaulted in many parts of the world. Yes, my life is fabulous and glamorous, but when they don't know who I am, my existence is dangerous. I've been assaulted in Paris, I've been assaulted in Guadalajara, and I've been assaulted in Los Angeles. And I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor, but I still wish those things would have never happened to me. And I truly wish and dream for a future where the children that I'm trying to defend right now, they don't have to experience this, you know? So that's why I'm here today. Thank you guys so very much.
As honest as you are, the visibility alone is helping so many young people, and we're very proud. We're very proud of what you're doing. We have also a special message from somebody that couldn't be here, but we're going to see a special message on video from Golden Globe winning and Emmy-nominated actress, singer, and star of the FX hit show, Pose, Micaela J. Rodriguez. Let's watch the video.
Hey you guys, what's up? It's Micaela J here, and I am so sorry that I could not be there with you guys today for the Hispanic Federation's New Act Initiative. It brings so many LGBTQIA plus Latinx communities together, so I definitely understand the effects of both communities as an Afro-Latina woman myself and a queer person myself. So I'm sending y'all all love.
Gabriella couldn't be here today also because of her busy schedule, but she sent this message. I know firsthand that what it means to have the support of a loving community as I navigated and embraced my gender identity. I am honored to be part of an initiative that will provide that much needed support system to so many other members of the Latinx LGBTQ community who are facing their own challenges and are on their own journeys of self-discovery. It is long overdue that we came together to empower each other, and I thank the Hispanic Federation and the Latinx LGBTQ leaders here today for launching the ACT initiative. So, yesterday we were having a kind of like intense conversation about those brothers and sisters, people that in our community support LGBTQ rights, although they are not identify as LGBTQ. Some people call them word allies, but some people don't like the word allies because at the end of the day, we're all human beings and we're here in this together. But we cannot do the work that we do without having those people that, regardless of their gender identity, still feel that our rights, our LGBTQ rights, our Latinx LGBTQ rights are important. And I am so proud to have here Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Thank you all for being here today. And I love hanging with a bilingual crowd that can hang with an English speech and a Spanish speech and cheer for all of it. So muchísimas gracias por estar aquí. You're all awesome. I'm thrilled to be a part of this initiative, and my family is helping to fund this initiative. I'm so moved and honored by this incredible panel that spoke to so many issues, and of course, intersectionality is at the crux of it all. And the Hispanic Federation has not reinvented the wheel here. We are supporting those people who have been doing the work for so many years and allowing greater advocacy and greater collaboration, because this is not just happening in Florida, this is happening in Texas, and this is popping up everywhere. We need to be there everywhere they are with greater organization to win this fight. I'm very aware that I've dedicated my life to an art form that does not exist without its LGBTQ geniuses, from Heart to Sondheim to Michael R. Jackson on Sunday night. So I'm thankful for the work I love to do to the LGBTQ plus community. But even more than that, personally, I'm a father raising 2 Latino kids, and they're 7 and 4. And when they say, I want that Barbie dream house, you buy the Barbie dream house. When they say, I'm really interested in Star Wars, you get the Star Wars stuff for Christmas, or Santa gets it for Christmas. When they show musicality, you get piano lessons. So as a parent, when they come to you with the most important questions of who they are and who they love, your job is to say yes. Your job is to say yes as a parent and to allow for them to be the fullest expression of themselves. That's your job as a parent, and that's what I want to do. Your job is to do what your father did, standing at that march, I said, Junior, estoy aquí. Junior, estoy aquí. And as parents, we're here to have our kids' backs everywhere in this country. Thank you.
Before we continue, I want to say that, through your work and everything that you do, it's incredible that, we're watching in the Heights and then suddenly you say, like, oh my God, it's Argentina. And that, you do Tic Tic Boom and you see Micaela J. That's part of it, it's that sensibility that you have of introducing identity in everything that you do. But also, since we are 2 days after the 6 years remembrance, everybody remembers your speech at the Tonys. What was that moment like? And yes, the entire nation was really shocked by what happened. But you used a moment that was yours to elevate this issue and elevate our community. So how was that?
Well, it was a speech I wish I never had to make, obviously. And at the same time, it hit our community twice. It hit our community at that intersection. There are LGBTQ plus brothers and sisters who were the victims of that horrific shooting, and they were Puerto Rican, they were Latino, and they were our brothers and sisters, and they were our kids in this community. And so I felt it was very important to speak to the moment. I meant to say love is love a couple of times. It came out 8 times. And I know that sometimes that can be misinterpreted as a sort of a kumbaya, we're all the same, but that night I meant it as an incantation against the hatred we'd seen the night before. As a prayer that our acts of love will outlast and out-organize these acts of violence and these acts of hatred. And I'm here continuing to do that as long as it needs doing.
Now we have a friend that you're going to be.
Yes, and I'm thrilled that we're not alone in this fight, and we're not alone in this struggle. And one of our trailblazers couldn't be here in person, but has sent us a message. So please welcome this video from Vicky Martin.
Lin-Manuel, and good morning, everyone. I'm Ricky Martin. I am Latino, and I am a U.S. citizen. I'm a father. I am a husband. And by the way, I'm also gay and a human being. The last one should be enough to make sure that my basic human rights are protected and respected, but they're not. At the moment, my basic human rights are under attack. Right now, there are hundreds of pieces of anti-LGBTQ legislation that are being discussed and approved. I am talking about the country, the entire country, and in Puerto Rico as well. There are people trying to take away the rights of trans people just for being who they are. These same people are attacking our rights to get married and form families. They are even attempting to stop LGBTQ people from adopting and having children. This has to stop. All people are people. Everyone should have the right to have a family, and obviously love who they love. See, to me, there's nothing more important than a family. I want my children to live in a world where their parents have the same rights as the parents of their friends. I want all children to be able to speak openly about their own families, not to be prohibited from drawing their own family tree at school just because of the state they live in. This is insanity. We must come together to fight for the rights of families like mine, to fight for the rights of families in general. For this reason, I am honored to partner with my friend Lin-Manuel Miranda, Hispanic Federation, and the incredible coalition of artists, activists that are coming together today to make sure that our generation lives up to the ideals of freedom, justice, and equity. Mi gente, we're all in this together, and we are going to stop hate. Martin Luther King said once, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." Let's make sure we uphold these truths Love will conquer all, and we will win this fight. Please join us, and together, let's create a lasting change to uphold our basic human rights. Si se puede. Juntos. Si se puede. Mucha paz.
Thank you, for being such incredible ambassadors. I'm going to ask the leaders to join us back on the stage, to join Valentina and Lin-Manuel for whatever questions we have then from the press. Questions?
Tengo micrófono. Muy buenos días. ¿Me escuchan?
Sí.
Perfecto. Muy buenos días para todos. Félix Pirela por acá, reportero de Telemundo 31 acá en Orlando. Bueno, quisiera que nos diera un mensaje en español para nuestra comunidad hispana acá en la ciudad, en la Florida Central. Sabemos que hace 6 años fue golpeada tras la tragedia de Paul. Y quisiera que los voceros en español, como Lin-Manuel Miranda, obviamente, dé un mensaje a esa comunidad puertorriqueña, sobre todo que todavía sigue golpeando y llorando a esos ángeles que perdieron la vida en ese club nocturno.
Sí. Bueno, sí. Estamos acordando esa tragedia 6 años después, pero también aquí con acción, porque queremos creer que hemos tenido mucho progreso en esos 6 años, pero todavía hay leyes contra nuestra forma de existir. Estamos aquí con acción y hay resources para esta comunidad aquí en Florida y en los Estados Unidos enteros.
Pues cuando pasó Post para mí fue algo que me cambió la vida. Personalmente para mí me afectó por ser latina y por ser drag queen. Esta noche una compañera de mi temporada de RuPaul's Drag Race, Cindy Fontaine, nos contó la historia de cómo ella tenía que haber dado show esa noche. Y pues ella conoció a un amigo que falleció en ese momento, y si pudiera decir algo yo, es a la comunidad aquí en Florida, en Orlando, que les afectó, a esas personas que ya no tienen esos angelitos aquí presentes. Siempre me quedo pensando en los amigos y la familia de los fallecidos, que tienen que seguir adelante con su vida, y pues mi corazón va hacia ellos. Y pues cómo hubiera querido que algo así no hubiera pasado, y tan profundo que me dolió, porque eran latinos, sus nombres eran nombres que podían haber sido primos, y pues eso me afectó muchísimo, y pues todo mi amor y cariño para los que están afectados y la comunidad aquí en Orlando.
Sí. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Roxana de la Riva del periódico La Prensa, y me gustaría saber si ustedes tienen otras iniciativas, aparte de dar recursos a las organizaciones sin fines de lucro, acerca de apelar estas leyes anti-gay que hay en toda la nación. Eso es lo que me gustaría saber.
Como organización nacional, la Federación Hispana ahora mismo apoya a organizaciones en 41 estados, Washington DC y Puerto Rico, a través de nuestro trabajo como federación de capacitación y de proveer recursos. También movilizamos estas organizaciones en diferentes temas que afectan a nuestra comunidad, ya sea a nivel estatal o a nivel federal. Hay varias de estas iniciativas que hemos utilizado durante muchísimos años, y es por eso que queremos utilizar todas esas herramientas que tenemos disponibles para entonces enfocarnos en esta nueva iniciativa, que a pesar que hemos apoyado organizaciones LGBTQ a través de todos estos años, esta vez esta iniciativa va a ser específicamente para esas organizaciones trabajando en comunidad por el momento histórico en que estamos viviendo y la necesidad de que se escuchen nuestras voces.
Buenos días, good morning, and thank you. Carolina Cardona with WKMG News 6. This is really a message for anyone in the group who would like to answer, is what would you say to that parent or family member that is having trouble with acceptance? I know the initiative is called ACT, Advance Change Together, but for that parent or family member watching this right now and is struggling with acceptance of a son or a daughter, you know, going through that transition, what would that message be?
You know, one of the things that we do at the Alliance is we meet with parents who are random. We don't know if those parents who are hanging out at the school, might be grandparents or BS, will be lucky enough to have an LGBT kid. But they go through our program anyway. And the idea is to get each one of those individuals to be an advocate for our community. So that when their comadre comes to them and says, tengo un problema, this advocate, this mom is gonna be able to say, no hay problema. Because usted debe de amar a su hijo o su hija igual que ayer. Y toda la familia lo tiene que apoyar. So it's about love for your children and love for your community. And so the crisis moment is something that we need to help families with. But it's for them to be able to accept, because the families have to come out too. And the families have to come to terms with the social pressures that they may experience. So as a community, we need to help them too. And that's part of the work we do, and I think that that's part of the objective, is that what has worked for us in Los Angeles, in East LA, South LA, can work in other parts of the country as well. And I think that this is the key part. You know, the other lady asked about what's the campaign, other than raising money. The campaign is doing the work. The campaign is doing the work in collaboration with other Latino organizations in ways that show that we understand our community, that we know what our community can understand, and also for us to meet them where they are. And that is huge key, you know? They don't know what the L, G, and the B, T, and the Q stands for. Let's talk about it. So that's how basic it can be. But in the end, it's about making sure that that crisis moment is not a crisis.
Going on what she said and meeting people where they're at, I also think it's being visible. It's being in other spaces besides non-LGBTQ spaces, right? So that we can gain that visibility, so that people can see us, that we're just like everyone else, right? We just have intersecting needs and we have other needs.
Any questions from the press? A couple of questions from the audience. We have time for a couple of questions from the audience.
Muy buenos días, soy el padre Huber Cajicá de Colombia, sacerdote católico, y con tristeza comparto que los sacerdotes ancianos llegamos a la vejez muy parecido a las personas trans, en soledad y en pobreza. Y un reto, y me gustaría saber qué hacen ustedes por las personas trans o la comunidad LGTB que llega a la ancianidad y que están pobres, solos y abandonados.
En Puerto Rico, en Puerto Rico, Ways Ahead es la única organización que apoya a la comunidad adulto mayor. Y nosotros comenzamos nuestras intervenciones con un adulto mayor a los 50. ¿Por qué a los 50 en vez de los 65? Porque la comunidad LGBT ha sido tan marginada que la medicina preventiva de salud mental o física no existe y por ende nosotros envejecemos más rápido que nuestras otras comunidades a nuestro alrededor. Así que nosotros pensamos y sabemos y reconocemos que nuestro adulto mayor no solamente necesita salud física, pero también salud mental por esa soledad, por ese aislamiento que recibe no solamente de su comunidad a su alrededor, pero también del sector religioso fundamentalista que en Puerto Rico está creciendo tanto. Pero como alguien dijo, nosotros y nosotras y nosotres podemos ser la semilla de ese cambio, no importa la edad. Y por eso nosotros instituimos una campaña que se llama Exprésate Boricua, Exprésate Puerto Rico. Porque hay que comenzar a quitar esa idea de que nosotros no podemos hablar de nuestros problemas. Sí tenemos que hablarlo abiertamente, sí tenemos que hacerlo en todos los ámbitos, como mi colega aquí Orlando dijo, es que hay que seguir quitando esa ideología latina que decía que solamente se habla en la casa, no, se habla en su totalidad. Y nuestro adulto mayor es nuestro joven también, porque ellos y ellas necesitan la misma o mucho más ayuda que ese jovencito que está comenzando a poner esos pasos en la comunidad LGBT. Así que para nosotros en Puerto Rico, ellos son nuestros héroes y heroínas, que nunca usan capa, pero que siempre usan sus pasos para ayudarnos a nosotros a ir a un futuro mejor.
Casa Andrea, que es un programa para personas refugiadas y en situaciones vulnerables, también da capacidad para personas de la tercera edad y también de mayores de 50. Tenemos que hacer conciencia y reconstruir que los programas no solamente pueden ser para jóvenes. Nuestros adultos LGBT y principalmente nuestras mujeres trans han forjado la historia de nuestras luchas y no podemos avanzar si no honramos su lucha y su pelea y su sobrevivencia. Ahora estamos aquí algunas mujeres trans en nuestra comunidad, pero es gracias a la vida de muchas mujeres trans que han estado aquí en la comunidad luchando y sacando la garra por todos nosotros y nosotras. Entonces, Casa de Andrea tiene la capacidad para albergar a personas de la tercera edad y cada mayo festejamos el Trans Mother's Day, que es una fiesta que le hacemos todo un día a mujeres trans mayores de 50 años.
One more? Okay.
Saludos por aquí, Osvaldo Fonseca de Chispa, Florida. Sabemos que estamos viviendo a nivel mundial, específicamente aquí en los Estados Unidos, lo que es el cambio climático. Se han tomado medidas con relación a la crisis climática que tenemos específicamente para la comunidad queer, la comunidad trans, que merecen ser protegidas, igualmente como pasó con los desplazados del huracán María, que cuando llegaron acá a los Estados Unidos, se vivió también esa necesidad. Quisiera, ¿verdad?, saber su posición acerca de la protección, ¿verdad?, para la comunidad.
So at the birth of Q Latinx, we actually created a program called Pathways, which actually supported the migration of those that were coming from Puerto Rico. So making sure that we had that channel and that conversation. We're also in conversation. We have high rates of HIV here in the Central Florida area as well as in Puerto Rico. So we're now channeling resources and talking to different organizations in other spaces such as Puerto Rico and here in the state of Florida to make sure that individuals that are migrating back and forth have those resources and those tangible supports when coming.
So I just want to, before we close, I want to thank two leaders that are here today that have been instrumental in the work that we, Hispanic Federation, have done here in Orlando, Nancy Rosado and Ricardo Negron. Thank you so much for your guidance. So this is a call for action. Everybody can actually join us in this fight. This is a call for action also for funders. Anybody that is seeing us, that is going to read about today, we're asking everybody to join us. Thank you to our incredible panel. Thank you to Lin-Manuel, Valentina, Stephanie Beatriz, Micaela J, Ricky Martin, and everybody that still wants to be part of this effort but couldn't make it today, and we're going to keep growing that list. Thank you to the Miranda Family Fund for the support. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And before we go, we are going to take a group picture. And that will be it for today. Thank you so much. Thank you.